Thank you, Charlie. So, thank you very much. Are we all sound working all right? Okay, excellent. So we've got to get the sound across to the translator and back again. I can hear a bit of a buzz on it. Let's stop. Okay. So, as Mr. Barrow said, I come from New Zealand, up here at the top of the world, and I spend my life travelling around the world. You like my map? This is what I use with the students, because I say to the students, what's wrong with my map? And they say, it's upside down. And I say, no, it's not. This is the right way up. It's just you've been seeing it your whole life upside down. For the first time, you're seeing it the right way up. Thank you. And but it's just about perception, isn't it? It's the way we view the world. And that's what I'm trying to do with students, is give them a different way of viewing examinations and learning and study and perseverance and all the things that are necessary. So I've been a teacher for 37 years, and I've been a teacher of the skills of thinking and learning for 27 of those years. I've worked in 38 different countries, and I usually stop in Thailand on the way to Europe. And so this trip, I'm going to Germany next weekend. I've got a school in Frankfurt, and then I'm coming back to Thailand. I've got other schools in Bangkok to work with. And so Bangkok has always been one of my favourite stops, and I really enjoy working with it. The students today and yesterday were absolute pleasure to work with. You know, absolutely wonderful. I really enjoy working with Thai students. They're just so attentive and interested, and yeah, just lovely. So where I live is a small town on the west coast of the North Island of New Zealand called Raglan. This is my office where I've done all my work, and these are my contact details. They're all on that sheet that you've got there. I'm not much of a social media person, so if you want to get in touch with me, you're welcome to send any questions to my email address. It is on that sheet. Any questions at all will be fine. I am a parent myself. I have 4 children. This is our family photograph from a couple of years ago. This is my granddaughter here, and I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. My daughter has just had a daughter of her own, so I have 2 granddaughters now. So family is very important to me. I'm also an author. I've written lots of books, all in the area of thinking and learning skills. And if you want to read any of my writing, you can search for me online, Lance King. But if you search Lance King, you discover there's lots of us. It's a very common name. And this is my favourite one, which isn't me like 40 years ago. It's some famous Canadian rock star with the same name as me. If you want to get my work, you have to remember to put a G in the middle. So Lance G. King online should get my work, if you're interested. This is my website, taolearn.com, daolearn.com, and it has a portal for parents. And so there are resources there for parents that you're welcome to access, all sorts of information you might like to have a look at. So I guess we've got to start with, I always like to start with purpose. What is the purpose of school-based education? And has the purpose changed since COVID? I think this is really important, because I think there are a lot of things that COVID showed us that we can actually benefit from by reflection. What is the purpose? Don't know why that came up around the wrong way, but what's the purpose of K to 12 schooling? Here, year 1 to year 13. Well, it's obviously to educate children. And what is the purpose of that? Well, the purpose of that is to give them more choices in life, isn't it? And because that's what we want. That's the only thing education really gives people, is more choices and more opportunities. But that's a good thing. And a greater chance of a productive and an enjoyable life, and to have an advantage in a competitive environment. These things are vitally important. And in a post-COVID, digitally enhanced world, what will give your children the greatest advantage? This is what you'll be thinking, because we are in a different world now to what it was. And you know, some of the things that have happened during COVID is that teachers have got more digitally competent, and students have got more digitally competent, and there are many, many more good quality websites available now than there were pre-COVID. So those are all things that we can take advantage of. Those are good things. And so we've got to help. I know everyone got sick of learning online during COVID. It was terrible. But now that we're past that, we can take advantage of some of those resources that are available online. The second question is, what do you want from this school? Now that's the most important question for parents, I think. What do you want from this school? I imagine what you want is you want the school to help your children to pass their high stakes exams, the IGCSE exams and the diploma exams. I'm sure some of you have got very young children, but you might be looking ahead to having them get good quality qualifications. And in order to do that, they've got to pass their exams. They've got to pass exams in order to gain good qualifications. They've got to gain good qualifications in order to get into a good university. And getting into a good university should help them prepare well for 21st century careers, shouldn't it? And it should help them to actually think about making a positive difference in the world. You know, and here we do the IBDP, the diploma. And the IB diploma, I think, is very, very good at helping children focus on making a positive difference in the world. And I think that's a real benefit. But I think there's something that can put all these things together, or something that will enable children to achieve all these things. And to me, this is the purpose, especially post-COVID, of a good quality education. And that is to help children become what are called expert learners. Because if a child is an expert learner, is brilliant at learning itself, in other words, can learn in any place, at any time, from any person, using any resources, if they're brilliant at learning, then they're going to be able to achieve whatever they want in the world. And usually this is defined as a self-motivated, self-managed, autonomous, independent, lifelong learner. And that's what really education is about now. You know, we're living in an age where it won't be too long before education is done via virtual reality. You know, the teachers, I think, are probably part of the past. You know, you can imagine that children putting on some kind of virtual headset and being connected with a great teacher in any subject. Or maybe there's a hologram of a teacher at the front of the room and they're engaged with that. You know, I think that this is probably the future. And we've got such good internet information that we've got to look ahead to that point. So becoming a great learner is going to be the key skill. And so what are the characteristics of that person? What are the characteristics of an expert learner? Well, firstly, they've got to know how to focus and concentrate, don't they? And that's a useful skill in itself. And of course, these days, with the distractions of phone and the distractions of social media and the distractions all around them, a lot of children have lost that ability to zoom in and focus. So in the last 2 days, I've been working with students, and I will tomorrow. And one of the things I talk about is how do you notice when you really, really zoom in and focus? And the thing, of course, is they notice that they can focus really well sometimes, but they often just get distracted. And the thing about focus is you can only focus well if you are only concentrating on one thing. So in order to focus well, you have to switch everything off. And that's what concentration is. It's zooming in and focusing on one thing. But of course, they also want to be connected. They want to be talking to their friends. So I had a clock drawn on that chart over there. I suggest 45 minutes with all your social media and your phone switched off, when you can really focus on your work, and then set an alarm and spend 15 minutes talking to your friends and chatting, and then turn it off again, 45 minutes concentration, 15 minutes chatting to your friends. And do it in a cycle like that, it achieves both aims. So concentration and focus is key. You want them to be good time managers, right? You want them to be well organised. You want them to be self-motivated, to be able to get themselves to do difficult things. A lot of my coursework is about helping children to notice how they get themselves to do things they don't want to do. And that's always critical, because it's easy to do the things you like. That doesn't take any skills at all. The hard thing is to do the things you don't want to do. And schoolwork is often in that category of things they don't want to do. So how do they get themselves to do that? That's the skill of self-motivation. You want them to be good researchers. Obviously, they've got to find what they want online. You want them to be good thinkers, and there's critical thinking and creative thinking. You want them to be able to communicate and collaborate. These children I've been working with are wonderful at working with each other, and that's great. That's a real skill. You want them to be literate in information and media. You want them to be responsible for their own actions, and you want them to be self-evaluating, reflective, and self-correcting. Wow, that's a lot of things, isn't it? So just imagine, do you want all these things, your children to have all these things, all these characteristics? Would you like to see those things in your children? Would you like this child to turn up in your house one day? That would be good, wouldn't it? So if you would like to see that child turn up in your house one day, what's your responsibility? What's your role? So if you'd like to see this person turn up, do you ever do any of these things? Exactly. You do all these things? Exactly. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that I think the most important role for parents is not to do things for their children, it is to teach their children how to do those things for themselves. So, of course, when your children are little, you have to do all these things for them, don't you? But as they grow up, I think it's the responsibility of parents to teach your children how to do all those things for themselves, how to take responsibility for their own actions. And they can only do that if you stop doing them for them. And this is a real difficult thing, and you've got to judge the right age for when they can take responsibility in different areas. But that's the most important thing. You've all got wonderful skills of organisation and time management and goal setting and getting things done. You need to transfer those skills to your children by giving them opportunities to live somewhat independently, to be able to make some of the decisions themselves. And that, I think, is the key responsibility for parents. But to me, it all revolves around learning. If your child learns how to be a great learner, then all these things will fall into place, given the right opportunities. And so I think effective learning has three components to it, which I call efficacy, agency, and action. And what these words mean, efficacy is not a word a lot of people have come across, but what I mean by efficacy is that they first have to build the belief that through their own actions they can create success for themselves and others. They have to believe that they can generate success, and that's a belief. If they don't believe that they can make success for themselves, then they won't even get started. It starts with belief. Do they believe that they're capable of creating success for themselves? Secondly, they've got to know how to do that. They've got to have all the skills, all the thinking and learning, what I call process skills. These are all the skills they need in order to become a good learner. And lastly, they've got to have action. They must be prepared to take action, make mistakes, and do what I call fail well, which I'll explain in a minute. I'll explain all of these first. So, the first one is, how do you build belief in creating success by taking action? Well, I think one of the ways is through role models and talking about people who you think are worthy role models. But they've got to be people that your children can relate to, children who seem to be something like them, but have achieved great things. And you can look anywhere. You can look in the sports area, you can look in music and arts and drama, or you could look in business. I'm kind of a business-oriented person, so I tend to look for business role models. And for example, and these are all stories of resilience, perseverance, innovation, and effort. I'm going to have to go over here so I can read the names off my computer. But I did a quick search of young, innovative, social entrepreneurs in Thailand. And I came up with this list here. This is Annabelle Hutton, who turns cotton waste into clothing. This person here is Ithapat Pieradichapan. I apologise for my pronunciation. Who makes deep fried flavoured seaweed. This woman here is Nullaport Kairish, who is a non-profit online publisher with a focus on disability rights. This is Amarit Charanfan. He's the CEO of Hubba, the first and largest co-working space. This is Sharani Kalyanamita, founded Arami, a female-centered ecosystem connecting women online and offline. This is Taro Anonched, co-founder of Take Me Tour, the largest peer-to-peer marketplace for local tours in Thailand. This is Kanpasorn Suryasanpech, formed Oka, a video call platform, the first mental health app in Thailand. And this is Somsat Bunkam, founder of Local Alike, a social enterprise, community-based tourism. So my apologies for my pronunciation. But these are all young people, and they've all set up successful business, and most of them have an ethical component to their business. You know, they're doing something that's good for the community, good for the planet. And I think stories of people like this, talked about at home, and so your children have someone to look at, to admire as a role model, someone who they think is kind of like them. That with hard work and perseverance and diligence and the right education, they could achieve something similar. So this, I think, is how people build belief that they can achieve good things. And it's not just stories of successful entrepreneurs. You also need to be telling your children your own stories. But they shouldn't just be the stories of all the wonderful things you've achieved. They should also be the stories of all the stupid things you've done, all the mistakes you've made, and what you learnt from each mistake. Because those are useful lessons for children to have. As parents, we've got to help our children realise that success comes through making mistakes, learning from each mistake, and moving on, and achieving more by learning from mistakes. So your own stories are important too. Secondly, we want children to develop self-confidence. Now, I don't think we develop self-confidence through competition. Now, I don't think there's anything wrong with competition. Competition is great. It's good to try and work hard to beat someone else. That's fine, but it doesn't make a person self-confident. Self-confidence only comes when you notice that you have improved compared to yourself, that you've got better at something. This is why one of the most useful things you can do with children, even little children, is each year have a look back at the workbooks they were working on the previous year, if you keep those, and have them look at those books. Because if they're in grade or in year 4 and they're looking back at the year 3 book, they'll look at that and say, this is so easy, I could do this in my sleep. And they'll realise that they've improved. But if they don't look back, school is just hard. It's always hard. It's always been hard. It'll always be hard. They just get the feeling school is hard. But when they keep looking back, they realise, actually, I'm doing better in maths. I'm doing better in languages. I'm doing better. But they only get that by looking back. So I think that helping children to realise that they have improved compared with themselves is very important. Which also means within any family, it's not useful to compare children with each other. Not useful at all, because they're completely different human beings. But it's very useful to compare each child with themselves and help them notice that they've grown. And then self-esteem. You know, I think sometimes we have a very performance-driven culture. And I see some families where children only get praise from their parents when they get that top mark and that top grade and that top performance. And so what happens is children get valued for what they do, not so much for who they are. And I think it's very important to make sure you are also valuing your children for the wonderful human beings that they are. And talk about what a wonderful person that they are. And that being a human being comes first, being a human doing comes second. There's nothing wrong with giving them praise for performance, but first we've got to make sure we're giving them praise for being a good person. And that's something in Thailand, you do it without thinking, you know. Thai people, it seems to me, focus very much on helping their children believe who they are, which I think is very important. And some of this comes through language. Language is really interesting because I'm not sure if it's the same in the Thai language, but in English, there's this whole thing around don'ts. Like, for example, if I was to say, whatever you do, don't think of a giraffe. Don't think of a giraffe. You can't not think of a giraffe, can you? Because the word don't just has no connections in the brain. As soon as I say giraffe, it makes a connection. And so, but think about how you talk to your children. Because sometimes, in some families, children get told a lot of don'ts. Don't do this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. And a child ends up just focusing on the wrong things, because if you say don't and they don't hear it, what do they hear? For example, if you were to say to a child something like, don't be stupid, what does a child hear? Well, if they hear don't be stupid often enough, they end up thinking, well, I must be stupid because everyone keeps telling me so. And that's so unfortunate, because when you say don't be stupid, what you actually mean is be smart, be wise, be creative, be resourceful. But instead of saying be smart, be creative, we say don't be stupid. And it gives them completely the wrong message. And so I think that, and I mean, if any of you have teenage children, think of all the things you don't want your child to do. The list is about this long, isn't it? It's huge. Teenagers, everything's dangerous, isn't it? Everything's dangerous for a teenager. Don't do this and don't do this and don't do this. And you can imagine the child kind of sitting in a bubble of don'ts. And so this child saying to you, well, I can see what you don't want me to do, but what do you want me to do? So I think we've got to spend as much time talking to our children about what we do want them to do as we spend telling them what we don't want them to do. That make sense? Okay. So all language contains suggestions. Eliminate the don'ts and focus on the do's. Don't worry about the don'ts. Focus on the do's, how you want your child to be. That creates a good lesson for them. Here's a good example. What can't you do? You know, how many people here would say, I can't sing? How many people really think they can't sing? Can't draw, can't do maths, can't make things with my hand, can't be creative, can't be funny. It's a language thing, mostly in English, I'm sure. Because when you say I can't, unfortunately in your mind you set up the suggestion that it's impossible. So what I do with children, actually I could show you what I do. What I've done with your children yesterday and today and tomorrow is at this point in the course, or something like this point, I've said to them, I need to prove this to you, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to teach you how to do this. So you see I've got a whole bag over there? How about I get you up and teach you how to juggle? How would that be? How would you like to do that? Would that be good? Get out of your chairs and learn to juggle. You're all nodding. That's funny, because the students, when I say the same thing, they're going, no. I can't do that. No way, I can't do that. It's impossible. And I say to them, well, how do you know it's impossible? And they say, because I've never done it in the past. I say, well, you see, that's the important thing. Your past is not your future. Just because you haven't done something in the past, that doesn't mean you might not do it in the future. So what I do is I get them to change their language. And so I get them to change from I can't to I haven't so far, but maybe I will. So I'm asking them, instead of saying to themselves, I can't juggle, that to say to themselves, well, it's true, I haven't done it so far, but maybe I will. And that opens up possibility. And that's all a child needs to actually take the next step, and the next step, and the next step. I had all the children today juggling. By the time we got to the end of the day, they all learned to juggle. And most of them thought it was impossible this morning. So in one day, they've learnt that they can do something that they thought was impossible. And that's why I carry that bag of juggling balls. Has been stored in Bangkok for the last 4 years. So yes, that's why I carry juggling balls all around the world. Just to show children that they can do things that they think are impossible. Okay, so, and what's the last one? So yes, help them move from I can't to I haven't so far. That's a critical thing. Does that all make sense? Okay. So the second thing is about skills. And there's lots and lots of information online about the skills that are going to be important this century. This is a chart from America. Whether it's the same here, I don't know. But they're talking about the hours worked in 2016 in these areas and the changes anticipated by 2030. So physical and manual skills will go down by 11%. Basic cognitive skills will go down by 14%. Higher cognitive skills will go up by 9%. Social and emotional skills, the need will go up by 26%. And technological skills, the need will go up by 60%. So these are the things we need to be focused on with our children, making sure that they've not just got the knowledge, they've also got the thinking skills, the information skills, the social and emotional skills, and the technological skills they need to succeed. And of course, one of the reasons for this is, of course, the revolution in robotics. You know, this is from Boston Dynamics. Did you realize that robots are up to this kind of level? It looks like a person dressed up as a machine, doesn't it? But it's not. It's actually a robot. Remarkable, isn't it? So it won't be too long before robots have taken over manual work. But of course, they won't take over all manual work. They'll only take over the expensive manual work. The poorest manual work will still be done by very poor human beings because robots nobody can afford to get the robot to do the poorest job. So we will still have the poorest of the poor. But that middle group of people, the expensive manual work, will be gone. So what are those people going to do? So that's the training that they need in more cognitive skills to be able to move to a more thinking job. And by 2030, I won't go through this in detail, but obviously automation is going to be much more significant. Cars, buses, aeroplanes, taxis. You know, I was in an aeroplane the other day actually, and we're coming in, you know, I thought that pilots still had to have their hands on the steering wheel at some point. And I don't know that the pilot realised that he had the microphone on because we're coming into land somewhere, I can't remember quite where it was, and he said, switching on automatic landing now. Automatically, I thought surely you'd want a pilot with his hands on the controls or her hands on the controls when you landed. No, it's all done automatically. I don't know what we need pilots for at all anymore. So, well, so anyway, automation, manual work and permanent contract work are disappearing. Artificial intelligence. Have you come across ChatGPT yet? ChatGPT, yes, it's an essay writing program. So it's going to change all forms of assessment in school, because children can just go and put a question in, it writes out the whole essay for them, and there's no way that a teacher or another program can tell that it was written by an AI. And so, yeah, assessment has to change. I don't know how it's going to change, but it's interesting. That was just very recently that came online. Most work will be contracted. Most people will be involved in freelance employability online, being selected by their skills and experience. And most of that will be driven by social media identity. You know, the social media is going to be the place that employers go to see whether someone's suitable for a job. And of course, each employer is not going to look through every single social media platform. They're going to hire companies to look through all the prospective employees' social media profiles and make a little summary. 2-line summary, is this person suitable? And it's going to be totally based on their social media presence. In other words, who they're connected to, what their links are, what their likes have been, what their emphasis is, what they look at a lot. It's a dangerous world, but yes, social media is going to be so much more important for employability. And this actually puts a responsibility on young people to take social media seriously, though most people don't. I'll get to that. And the primacy of acquired knowledge will be superseded by the skills needed to find information, learn, adapt, create, and problem solve. So these are the key skills for the future. So the same sort of skills. This is the World Economic Forum, and it's the same kind of skills that they've said are most important for 2025. Analytical thinking, active learning, problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, leadership, technology use and design, resilience and reasoning, problem solving. These are the critical skills. These are what we've got to actively teach children. We can't just expect them to pick these things up as they go through school. We've got to actively be teaching them these skills. This is a quote from Andreas Schleicher, which sums it up, I think. He said, "The world's economy no longer rewards people just for what they know. The world economy rewards people for what they can do with what they know." It's what they can do with information. It's what they can do with their knowledge. They've still got to have lots of knowledge, but it's what they do with it is becoming more and more important for a currency for future employment. So there's lots and lots of publications about this if you're interested in looking at them. There's lots of papers on what are the most important skills. These skills are in lots of different national curricula. I haven't seen the Thailand national curricula in recent times, but usually when countries rewrite their curricula, they always these days put a component of 21st century skills, 21st century competencies, ATL skills, whatever they call it. Everyone's got them. So to me, this is all about control. You know, you think about your children at school. Some of you have got very young children, but as they progress through school, what are they going to have control over? It's interesting when you think about that, because do they have control over who they're taught by? Of course not. Do they have control over what they're taught, where they're taught, when they're taught, how they're taught? Do they have control over who sets the tests, who marks the tests? Of course not. They have no control over any of those things at all. So for some children, they feel helpless. They've got no control. It's being done to them. So we've got to make sure they realise there are two areas where they do actually have some control. The first area is how much effort they put in. That's something that's in their control, how hard they work. And teachers are always trying to get students to work harder. You know, it's just a never-ending struggle. But the other area is what strategies they use. In other words, what techniques they use or what skills they have for things like time management, listening and concentrating, researching effectively, collaborating with others, reading for understanding, remembering well, setting and achieving goals, all these things. And of course, that's what I put in my courses. So that's what I was teaching the IGCSE students yesterday, and the diploma students today, and the diploma students tomorrow. It's a whole set of all those things and lots of others, because these are the things that can make the difference between a high success and lower success, or even between success and failure. So this is what I tend to focus on. Learning from feedback. So developing student agency is about focusing students on factors to improve their success that are in their control. So it's about giving students the feeling that they have some control over their learning. Because getting good grades, getting good marks, getting good scores is on their mind, but the way to do that is to be very good at the skills that underlie that, the skills that underpin all learning. So that was the first one, was efficacy, about self-belief. The second one was agency, about skills. The third one is this thing I call failing well. Now, this comes from a study that I did back in 2008 in New Zealand. In this study, I had 100 students, high-achieving students, and halfway through my study, they all had a major examination. And some of them passed that examination at the very top level, did brilliantly. And some of them were more in the middle zone, they did okay. And some of them were really at the bottom, did really badly. So I took out that middle group and just compared the ones at the very top with the ones at the very bottom, and tried to find something that went with that. And I wasn't having any success until I asked them one key question. So I'll ask you. Have you ever had a situation in your life where you set a goal, you wanted to achieve something, and you didn't achieve it? It didn't happen. And it could be something as simple as, you know, playing golf and you want to win a game against your best friend and one day you don't win a game. Or it could be something important, really, really important in business, or it could be something in a relationship, but a time where you wanted to have a certain outcome and you didn't get it. What did you do next? Because that turns out to be the critical factor that goes with academic success. And what I discovered was that 100% of the students who were in the top academic group had learnt to do this thing I called fail well. Whereas 100% of the students which were in the bottom group were doing the opposite, which is failing badly. So what does that mean? Well, it's very simple. It's about reactions to that failure situation. Now, I'm describing failure as a time when you set a goal and you don't achieve it. Any time at all, big or small goal. But you want a certain outcome and it doesn't happen. Someone who fails well will acknowledge their failure. They'll say, yes, I failed. It's true. It happened. It's a fact. Don't have a big emotional reaction. It's just something that happened. And then they will analyse it for the factors that were in their control. So they won't focus on the things that were out of their control. So if it's a student doing a test, they won't focus on the teacher or the school or the test or the marking or anything. They'll focus on what they did, what was in their control. Then they'll work out what they could have done better, and then they'll make changes, and then they'll go back and they'll do it again. They'll retake or they'll rewrite the answers to the questions they got wrong. But they'll make sure that they do it differently the second time round. And that's failing well. And all the children in the top academic group had learned how to do that by themselves. Whereas all the students in the bottom academic group, in the same situation, like they sat a test and they didn't get the result they wanted, would do things like blame the school or the system. It's not my fault, it's the school's fault. Or they would blame someone else. They'd blame the teacher. It's not my fault, it's the teacher's fault. It's my parents' fault, it's someone else's fault. Or they might pretend that they're not having any failure. These were students who were doing very badly in their tests, but they were saying, no, I can ignore that, just put it behind me, move on, ignore it. Or there were students who would add some drama to failure. Like, I can't go to school, my life is over, it's all bad. A whole lot of emotional drama. I mean, it's for some students that's very real, and we must take notice of that. But for a lot of students, it was just like hysteria. And for other students, avoiding any activity that could possibly result in failure. This was a group of students who never ever chose to do anything that they weren't already good at. They'd never take a risk and try something that they could fail at. And that was significant. So it's like this. On receiving test results worse than they expected or hoped for, what would you think your children would do? Because some children will blame the school, blame the teacher, blame the weather, blame themselves, and that's failing badly. Whereas other students, and this is the critical thing, will rewrite the answers to all the questions they got wrong. So they've had a test, they've got some answers wrong. That night at home, they'll find the right answer and they'll actually rewrite it. Then next day, they'll check back with the teacher to make sure they've now got the right answer. They'll take that and say to the teacher, is this right now? And the teacher can then see that they've written, not to get extra marks, just to make sure they've got the right answer. And then they might ask the teacher, okay, what can I do to improve? That's failing well. You see, if you do this, then every failure becomes an opportunity to learn, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to progress. So this is like a different way of viewing failure. Every successful person in the world has had lots and lots of failure. I've never come across someone who hasn't. But they've learned from every failure. But I think we've got to teach this. We've got to teach children how to do it, and assessment is a good opportunity to teach them. Okay? So, right. Actually, I thought we'd take a little break now, about 5 minutes, so you can have a stretch and you can get something to eat and drink. But I've also got a couple of resources for you if anyone's interested. I've written some books. This is a book for students called Exam Confidence, which is a little book. Very skinny, children can get through it. This is a book for students on how to pass exams. And I've also got the book for parents called The Importance of Failing Well. So these are available if you'd like to have a look at them. This one on Amazon is $15 US, which is 500 baht plus postage and packaging. This one, I haven't done my animations right. Sorry. It was supposed to go differently. This one, that's what it costs if you buy it online. And today, if you're interested, you can have the both together for 600 baht if you have cash. I don't have very many. I've got about 10 books here. If anyone's interested, come up and see me in the break. Let's take a 5-minute break and have something to drink and something to eat. And come and see me if you'd like to have a look at these books. Okay? 5 minutes and then we'll get back. And I'll go through some more study techniques for your children. Sure. Risk children came from disadvantaged backgrounds and really, really difficult places. But these days, certainly in the United States anyway, America's newly identified at-risk group is pre-teens and teens from affluent, well-educated families. This is where the at-risk children come from these days. I don't know if it's the same here. But in spite of their economic and social advantages, they experience amongst the highest rates of depression, of drug abuse, physical complaints, and unhappiness of any group of children. And this is a really serious problem. So there's children who have all the advantages in the world are suffering from all of the problems. And it's a difficult one, because what you want is for children to be able to resist all those pressures and to be resilient, to be strong on the inside. So where does this come from? This is a really good book to read if you're interested, called The Price of Privilege by Dr. Madeline Levine. And she said the two main contributing factors actually come from parents, and they are a combination of achievement pressure and isolation. In other words, parents who are only focused on the grades and the scores and the marks that their children get, and parents who have no time to spend with children because they're very, very busy with their own careers. And that's a normal, perfectly normal thing. But it's really difficult for young children. You know, privileged children sometimes are quite isolated from their parents. And that's unfortunate, because the only thing they want is more connection with their parents. And it creates all sorts of difficulties. And so, how do we grow resilient children? Children who are strong on the inside. Well, I think there's a couple of ways. One thing is we've got to encourage children to take on new challenges, to try things that they are a challenge for them, are difficult for them, are things that they really have to push themselves to achieve, and accept that failure is part of the process. That's how you learn to improve. So sports is a really good area for this. Encouraging children to play physical sports, even if they don't really want to, just encouraging them as much as possible to get out there and play physical sport. Because in physical sport, you have to fall over, and you have to get back up again, and you have to fall over, and you have to get back up. Just that physical action of falling over and getting back up again builds that strength on the inside. And help them notice their own way of recovering from adversity. In other words, when children are feeling down, something bad's happened, when they're teenagers, and they've had a fight with their girlfriend or something and they're feeling terrible, or when they're little and they've just fallen over and they're feeling really bad because they skinned their knees. You just wait until they are feeling better again, and then you say to them something like, "Wow, it's wonderful to see how good you are at getting back to feeling okay again." That's a really important skill. Notice how good you are at getting back to feeling okay again. And get them to notice that and treat it like a skill, like a process, like a talent, like something that they're good at. And when they start to notice that, they'll start noticing it in other areas of their life. And they'll learn that being resilient is something that I do. It's not something that happens to me. So this is useful, I think. Here's a good example. This is from a long, long time ago in my family, when I took my children bungee jumping. You know bungee jumping? You go up and you leap off a platform with a rubber band. Now I know in Thailand there have been 2 accidents that I've heard of where one person died. And so I can't encourage you to take your children bungee jumping, because sometimes it's not done very well. But something, I don't know what would be equivalent, something where it's something that they do that they feel a little bit afraid of, but you can encourage them to do. Heights is a good one, going up somewhere high, but just encouraging them to feel strong and manage being up high, or something like that. Help them to face their fears and realize that the problem isn't the thing itself, the problem is just the fear, and helping them to learn to overcome fear. Actually, when I was in Chiang Mai a few years ago, I went on the zip lining thing, where you hook yourself up to there and you go zip. And that's a really good one for overcoming a fear of heights, because I was quite afraid, when I was up there, but it's really safe, and you zip and you zip and you zip, and by the time you get to the end, it's no problem at all. So, that sort of thing, kind of challenge experiences like ropes courses and climbing courses, anything like that in a safe environment that can help them to overcome their fear is a really good thing, because it helps them develop inner strength. Now I'm going to talk about social media. Social media, I think, is something that needs talking about, because it's an experiment that's been run around the world with no controls. No controls. And I think in some areas it's out of hand. Now I've put this up for one good reason. You see, where are we? January. This was about 6 months ago. I got this off an online source of the most popular social media platforms. And Facebook was at the top, then YouTube, WhatsApp, etc., etc. But that's actually out of date, completely out of date. Because TikTok, by October last year, had 3 billion users. That's nearly half the people on the planet were connected to TikTok. Now, why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because you know that TikTok is owned by ByteDance in Beijing. It's a Beijing-run company. And in China, the version of TikTok you can get is completely different to the version of TikTok you get everywhere else in the world. In China, TikTok shuts down at 9 o'clock every night. In China, if you're under 14 years, you cannot access TikTok for more than 90 minutes a day. TikTok is used to promote educational videos and experiments you can do at home. Of course, it's a lot of political messages as well, but it's actually used as an educational platform. Outside of China, this has got some of the most awful content in the world on it. It's got pornography on it. It's got violence on it. And the problem with all social media platforms is the economic model. Every social media platform makes money by advertising. And the way they get advertising is keeping your eyeballs on the screen. And the way they keep your eyeballs on the screen is by promoting things that you're likely to click on. And do you know what the top 4 things for children to click on are? They are outrage and violence and disgust and hatred. Those are the top 4 things that people click on. Outrage, violence, disgust, and hatred. And so it's putting those things in front of children. And when children start clicking on them, they get fed more and more and more and more and more and more. So what's happening is children are ending up in these little rabbit holes of video clips that are coming at them constantly, which is convincing them that the world is a horrible place, that the world is a really, really awful place full of terrible, terrible things. Now, I think that's a really bad economic model. Imagine if the economic model of social media was promoting communication between people, cooperation between people, promoting democracy, promoting ways of getting on with each other, promoting social good. That would be worthwhile. So I think we've got to be very careful about this. And the other thing is that people are finding that because of social media, they're getting distance from their own children. I don't know if any of you are noticing that, especially if you've got teenage children, that the distance between you is becoming greater. Now, this is a really good man to read, Gabor Mate, and he talks about attachment. And what he says is that, and I know this because I'm quite old, 50 years ago, role models for young people, I was in my teens 50 years ago, and role models for people I looked up to were always adults. They were always heroes, racing car drivers and mountain climbers, and I looked up to them. To find out how to behave, I would look to an adult role model. And that was the norm 50 years ago. But in the what's called 50 years ago, a teenager's orientation was vertical, looking to adult world for appropriate role models, parents, grandparents, adult heroes, for a behavioural compass. In other words, to work out how to behave. But in the last 50 years, everything has changed, especially since the advent of social media. Now, most teenagers' orientation is horizontal. They're looking at the same age group in order to work out how to behave. And I have to tell you, the worst role model in the world for a 14-year-old boy is another 14-year-old boy. That's the worst possible role model. And so they're taking guidance from people their same age, which is the worst possible thing to do. So they're looking to peers and the same age influences to work out how to behave. And they're using peers as behavioural compass, which creates a dissociation. So they're no longer looking to their parents for advice on how to behave. It's a teenage thing. And this is, I think, causing all sorts of problems. Of course, they do get the strength of a like-minded group. They're connected with people who think like they do. but they get the loss of adult wisdom and they get the potential and increased likelihood of making a really, really bad decision. And I think this is a real problem. So how do we address this? I think we've got to put an active part in promoting adult role models again. Start talking about adults that you know that have achieved really good things. Find out who their favourite sports person are, who's their favourite footballer, who's their favourite basketballer, and investigate their life story. And then start talking about, if they like Michael Jordan, it's a bit old now, but they like Michael Jordan, the basketball player. Talk about all the challenges he overcame in his life, all the decisions he made, all the ways in which he got himself successful. Try and orient them back towards looking to adults to find out how to behave. This is kind of like a phase. My children have been through it. All my children are grown up now. But now they're all over 30. They ask me for advice again. They're back to asking me for advice, which is great. But they went through a big, long period of not wanting to have anything to do with adults. So, I think we've got to take steps to try and get children to look to adults for role models. So this is the same thing, the social media thing. So 2 key things I try and get across to teenagers is, one is everything they post is there forever. Even if they think they've deleted it, they've got rid of it, someone can find it if they have to. Facebook doesn't delete anything ever. Even if you think you've deleted it, it's still there. And if the service is free, then you are the product. Your data is being sold. And this is what I was mentioning, the business model, the outrage economy, where everything's about outrage and violence and being attracted to that, a confirmation bias. In other words, what you click on, you get a lot more of, which convinces you that that's how the whole world thinks. Because, I'm getting all these feeds on all the things that, they've run experiments where someone has set themselves up pretending to be a 14-year-old girl, and in the first day started to connect to sites about dieting. Within 3 days, this person who had set themselves up falsely as a 14-year-old girl was getting advertising and getting links to sites that promoted anorexia, that promoted bulimia, that promoted all the worst possible things for young girls. And it only took 3 days for the algorithm, the AI, to start sending them things that were the worst possible things for that. If that had been a real 14-year-old girl concerned about her weight, then that would have been the worst possible things for her to see. It's all done remotely. It's all done by an AI in the background running algorithms, giving people more of what they want. And so the companies stand back from it and say, it's not our fault. We're just giving people what they want. Well, I think it's terrible. Ideological chapter. So the only control we've got is over engagement, is about deliberately taking steps to engage responsibly, and also to install ad blocking software where you can. On your computer, do you have ad block? Because if you do, then you won't get half the ads will not turn up. I don't get any ads on YouTube, for example, because I have an ad blocking software, no ads at all. You can set these things up, but then the social media companies can also get around them, but there's some steps you can take. So I've got these, I've got a couple of graphs that shows you how bad this is. This is trends in proportion of emergency department visits that end up with a mental health discharge diagnosis. And you see, the critical thing is that everything changed around 2008, 2009. I've got the statistics here. That in 2007, we had the first iPhone. By 2009, we had the first like buttons and face tagging. By 2010, you were able to like individual comments, and by 2011, you were able to share and retweet. So it all happened around 2009 to 2011, and notice how the mental health diagnosis went up and up since 2009, 2010. This is depression, same again, 12 to 17-year-olds, 18 to 25-year-olds, from 2009, 2010, it all went up. And this is the worst one. And I apologise if this upsets any person because of their experience, but I think this is important. This is Molly Russell. And Molly Russell is a girl, a 14-year-old girl in the UK, in England, who committed suicide. And just last year, the coroner came out with a definitive statement. And the coroner said, Andrew Walker of the Northern District of Greater London said her death was an act of self-harm while suffering from depression and the negative effects of online content. He attributed her death to online content. And he said, the online material Molly viewed on platforms including Instagram and Pinterest was not safe and should not have been available for a child to see. So he came out and made that's the first time anyone has made a really, really official, definite statement like that. And people are calling it like the big tobacco moment for social media. You know, that moment where the big tobacco companies had to admit that they had been deceiving people for 50 years by pretending that cigarettes didn't cause cancer, by denying it. Well, this is the same moment for social media, because the social media companies have been saying, no, it's not our fault. People are just getting what they want to see. Not our fault. Well, this is hopefully going to make some changes. This is serious, and I think we've got to take it seriously. So what do? This was bbc.com. You can have a look at this, September 21, 2022, if you're interested. So I've got a set of skills to teach young people, social media skills. And the first one is to help children identify their own virtues and values, what sort of a person they are offline and who they want to be. Get them to get very clear about the kind of person they actually are, what is important to them, what they value, and what virtues make up a good human being. And then help them identify the difference between their reputation and their character. Because online, it's nothing to do with your character, is it? It's just to do with your reputation. And this is unfortunate because you can have a reputation for being a really awful person, whereas you're actually a good person. So the trick with it seems to me to be, is to try and help children to build an online presence that reflects who they actually are as a good person. Because then they'll only interact with content that supports them as a good human being. You see? Help them create an online identity focused on their strengths, their goals, and exemplifying their virtues, what they're good at. And try and help them to find positive, inspirational people to follow. Instead of following the baddest person or the worst person or the most horrible thing you can find, try and encourage them to find good people to follow. People that will inspire them, people that will make them feel good about themselves, good about setting goals and achieving things. And help them make ethical choices about likes. What they like creates a record in their social media profile. Every single like creates a record. So if they're liking horrible things, that will create a record and they'll start getting more horrible things. So if they only like ethical causes, things that they feel are worthy causes, then they will get more of that fed to them. And help them set up and maintain strong relationships that exist both on and offline. So not just online relationships. Nothing wrong with having an online relationship as long as you also see that person offline as often as possible. So if it's online and offline, then it can be a healthy relationship. And try and help them have regular, deliberate digital holidays. You know, digital holiday, where they've got no screen time at all. And you can't really enforce it, but help them to do that. Help them to take time away from screens. That's TV screens, laptops, tablets, and phones. Put them away for a day every now and then. And just have real time with real people. Actually, Gabor Mate has got a really good strategy that he talks about. That same thing about children being distanced from their parents. He said one really good way to do this, and I remember I used to do this when my children were young, but that was before social media. It's even more important now. Is every now and then have a holiday, just a short holiday, could be just a couple of hours, could be a whole day, could be a whole weekend. Have a short holiday with one child, one adult with one child. So if you've got more than children, like I've got 4 children, it just meant me taking one child in the car and we go off driving somewhere and have a little holiday. Now if you're going to do it, set up an agreement first that I want to have a day with you where we don't have any phones. Can you do that? And they'll go, they won't like it, but maybe they'll agree. So you get in the car and you put the phones in the glove box and you lock them in the glove box. And then you drive. And they'll sit there scowling for the first hour. What am I doing here? But then nothing happens. They can't get on their phone. They get bored. Eventually, they have to start talking to you. They have to. They've got no one else to talk to. It's just you and them. And you're going, so they have to start talking. And then you can start having some really good conversations. Ask them questions about social media. Ask them questions about what's going on in their life. Ask them questions about how they're coping with the difficulties of being a teenager. And you can have, car conversations are great because you're both facing forward. And so it's easier to have an emotional conversation if you don't have to look at each other. It sets up a little bit of a safety zone because you're both looking forward and you can have really good conversations. And so a day with a child with no phone, neither of you's got a phone, you can have some really deep conversations, some worthwhile conversations, and you can re-establish the link between yourself and your children. You can remake that emotional connection, which seems in modern times to be lacking. So digital holidays are really, I think, to be encouraged, and I would suggest a one-on-one, one-to-one works really well. Okay, so these are some things, I put these on that notes. There's a wonderful book by Johann Hari called Stolen Focus. Tristan Harris has made the Social Dilemma, which is a documentary. There's a podcast called Your Undivided Attention, and the Centre for Humane Technologies is doing a lot of work in the United States to try and change legislation around social media. And they're having some success. So those are all on that sheet, and they're worth having a look at. Okay, I've got a couple more. How long we got? We've got 15 minutes. Are you okay for another 15 minutes? We're good for that? Okay. So this is stuff from Professor Dweck from Stanford University in the United States on praise. Sure, if you have to go, that's perfectly fine. On praise. Now, just imagine that your child has done something wonderful at school. Got a really good grade, a really good score, really good performance, something wonderful. And you want to say to them, well done, that's wonderful to see. How do you do that? What do you actually say? Because it actually seems to make a difference. Because if you say to your child something like, it's wonderful to see how hardworking, how persistent, how determined you are, what you're doing is you're linking your approval to something the child has some control over. They can do more of it if they want to. And that means that any test, any assessment is simply a measure of progress and an opportunity to learn. Connecting your praise with something the child has control over is a really, really good thing to do. But other people sometimes do the opposite. They connect the praise to something a child has no control over. Like it's wonderful to see how smart you are, how talented you are, how intelligent you are. Those words suggest something that's fixed in the person. And so what you're doing is you're connecting your praise to something a child has no control over. They can't do any more of it. This is my talent, this is my intelligence. They can't make that bigger. They can't do more of it. And so then any test or any assessment becomes a critical judgment and an opportunity to fail. So it's all in that language. It's all in the way in which you talk to your children. Try and make sure that any praise focuses on things the child can do something about. So that's that hasn't worked either. Focus any praise for achievement on observed effort rather than ability. So this top one here, on observed effort rather than ability. Catch them putting in effort. Catch them working hard and say, it's wonderful to see how hard you work. It's wonderful to see how much you practice. It's wonderful to see the effort you're putting in. And then they'll just do more of it. But also in terms of improving learning, their best method of improving learning is to improve skills. I haven't written that very well. Organisation. Make sure they have a place to do schoolwork which suits them physically. A desk, a chair, a table, a light, something where they can sit, something that grows as they grow. So they've always got a good place to go and get their work done. That's important. Physical things are important. Help build good habits of study. Habits are great. If possible, at the same time every day. It doesn't have to be, but if you can encourage the child to build a habit of as soon as they get home, maybe they have something to eat and then they sit down and get their homework done straight away, it's a wonderful habit to build if you can do that. It doesn't suit everyone, but it's great to build habit. Well supported, so you're the one bringing them a cup of tea or you're the one, supporting them in creating those habits. Teach them how to make good decisions by involving them in all family decision making that affects their life. I've seen so many instances where parents make all the decisions about a child's life, including what what school to go to, what university to go to, what job to have, all these things. And the child just ends up completely helpless because they've never been involved in how to make a decision. Decisions have been made for them. Well, children are only going to get good at making decisions if you involve them in the decision-making process. So any decision that comes up, you've got to look at the positives, you've got to look at the negatives, you've got to weigh it up, you've got to make a balanced decision. We've got to teach children how to make good decisions by getting them involved in decision-making processes. And it could be as simple as working out what to buy at the supermarket or working out where to go on a holiday. Any decisions, get them involved in the process and then they'll learn how to make good decisions. Organisation. Help them to learn to use the things they enjoy as rewards for getting work done. So there's nothing wrong with playing for an hour on your Xbox. Nothing wrong with that at all, as long as you've got your homework done. The problem is when you spend the hour on the Xbox before you've got the homework done. Doesn't work. So help them learn to have the reward after they've got the work done. To remember, this is really important, to remember what they learn at school. Each night they need to read over what they did that day. So it doesn't matter at what age, any age at all. When they bring home their work from school, just take some time in the evening to sit down and what did you do today? And if you just say that, what did you do today? They'll say, oh, nothing, just school. Say, show me what you did today. Let's go through it. And just get them to explain everything they did at school that day to you. Because if they explain it to you, in their mind, they're remaking the connections that they made in class. So that helps them build good memory and helps them, and they might come across a question. They might come and say, I didn't really understand this thing the teacher told me. Can you help? So you're getting involved, reprocessing what they learned at school. Allow them to form study groups with friends as long as they use the time together to get work done. Study groups are awesome. I was encouraging both class today and yesterday to set up a study group, to help each other, to teach each other, to share information. So children teaching other children is a very powerful learning mechanism. And nearly the end, the idea of success through learning is picked up best by imitation. Make the culture of your family a learning culture. And what I mean by that is if the only person who's learning in your household is a child, they feel very isolated and alone. But if everyone in the family is interested in learning new things, if everyone's talking about, did you see what was on the news today? Did you see in the newspaper? Did you see what's happening on the other side of the world? You know, if everyone's involved in finding out new things and connecting with new information, then the child feels like everyone is learning. And of course, this is the last point, once you realise this, you realise your children will imitate you. So the very hardest thing is to be worthy of imitation. That's the hard thing. But no one ever said parenting was going to be easy. Okay, so that's pretty much, I think that you've probably had enough from me. So that's all it from me. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.